What's happening, everybody? Welcome to episode 16 of DDC for Wednesday the 5th of June 2019. Today we're going to look at a simple particle effect using the particle system in Unity to add an explosion effect whenever our enemies or player is destroyed, which should help sort of the actual feel of the game and gives us a chance to look at the various different options you've got for configuring particles and particle effects and randomizing them so each one doesn't look exactly the same. So without further ado, let's get into the code. Okay, so to add our explosion effect when the enemy is destroyed, we're going to use particle effects, or the particle system component on Unity. And there's going to be two parts to that. First of all, we're going to set up the particle and the actual sort of define the attributes for it to control how it looks. And then obviously we need to trigger it at the right moment. So first of all, we'll look at the actual particle system itself. And for that, we can, to make things a little bit easier as well, we're going to import the particle sort of effects from the standard assets that Unity give us to give us some sort of a foundation for our explosion effect. So in Unity, you might find in import package you should have a bunch of different options in here potentially. One of them is the particle effects. If you've chosen not to install that when you installed Unity, or I think on Mac, which is what I'm on, it doesn't come in automatically. Then we can go to the asset store, and this is the package you want. You can download it from there. So the standard assets includes a whole bunch of useful things for different examples, for different games and types. But for us, we're just going to grab the particle effect, so we'll import that. And then in here, we'll close some of this down so we can see what we're doing. So standard assets, make sure we can see what we're doing here. We don't want all of this coming in. So let's uncheck all this, and then we'll just add in the bits we want. So if there's anything in there we want, it's just the particle systems in here. We see that includes a whole bunch of different materials and prefabs, different explosions and things like that. So we will pull that in and have a play. Once that's imported, we can go to our prefab next. So go to our scene view, prefab, and so it's the enemy prefab that we need to add our particle to. So we're going to go in here, we're going to filter and make sure we add a particle system component. Now you may be seeing something slightly different, but I think there's a bug in Unity that defaults to not having material for the particles, so these sort of funky pink squares. So we're going to render, we want to change the material anyway. You see there's no material set. We can use just the default particle that Unity comes with even if we hadn't installed the assets. That's that one there. But obviously as we've installed these assets, we've got a whole bunch to choose from. So we can choose all sorts of stuff. There's a smoke one there. Different types of flames, glows. But we'll choose that one as that looks closest to what we're looking for. Yeah, lots of cool effects in there, but we'll go with that one. Okay, so that's our material for our particle renderer. Now obviously we only want the particle to fire once, not to loop over and over again, and we don't want to do it automatically if we fire this up now. Let's have a quick look here. Okay, so some of it looks like some of the scripts. Okay, so let's just remove the bits we don't need. So some of the scripts that we imported got an error, it looks like, so we'll delete those because we don't need the scripts right now. There we go. Okay, so we can see that the particles fire right away, so effectively as soon as the objects are created, and they loop over and over again. So we'll leave that as it is for now while we configure the particle effects, just because it will make it a lot easier for us to actually see what we're doing as we're editing it. And then obviously once that's done, we'll change that so it only fires sort of once when we want it to. So back to our particle system down here, we can change a lot of these different settings to actually sort of set what we want to set. So down here you can see obviously we have the emission, that's the number of particles, and it has it here over time. We do it in bursts, things like that. So you can see there we have 2, 5. So let's have a little play and see what we think looks good. You can also configure bursts look, so we can have bursts at different intervals and things like that. So that looks a little bit more interesting, having it as a burst, obviously explosion. So that's 0 in here. Let's have a play with this. Let's just have it sort of slightly more randomized maybe. Okay, let's try that. Right, the shape itself, that's the sort of the shape it's going to move out on. You can see now we've got a little gizmo on our view to show us that shape. So let's have a look here. So it then comes out sort of very more angled. That's probably getting a bit close to what we might want. Okay. So that's showing you the actual radius there. We want it from the very centre if we can. Let's have a look, see this one. Okay, that looks a bit better now. So it's sort of clumping together as it comes out, and then we have a slight randomisation of the actual cloud dispersing. Let's have a look, keep working through this. Okay, then you have a whole bunch of different other options we can add. So there's this sort of stuff that's enabled by default, but we can have sort of velocity over lifetime, so that we can have it as either like linear velocity, or you can have different velocities, so the speed will change over the lifetime of the particle. What else have we got here? Force, colour. Let's have a look and see what sort of difference that makes. You see that gives it like a tinge, an orangey tinge. Let's that maybe a bit more orange, and slightly more explosion like there. You can see you can actually change it over the lifetime, so we could actually have it getting darker, for example, as that then fades out. That was quite good. Okay. And then we have the size. Okay, so let's do size over lifetime. And here we have the curve for the size. Random, maybe let's do randomize, let's have a look. And let's do 1, 10. It's pretty huge, so let's go something smaller. So then we're just sort of introducing a bit more randomness to it, so that each sort of particle effect we have doesn't look exactly the same each time. Might be a little bit too big. Let's go with that for a minute. Okay, let's keep going. So there we have rotation, so it sort of spins away. Maybe just a slight rotation. Okay. The noise gives you sort of like a movement. Obviously that's not so good for our explosion, because our explosion needs to start at the centre of the enemy and then go out, not necessarily in a uniform way, but in a sort of more predictable way, so we'll leave that. Well, quite cool, you can sort of daisy chain the particle systems as well, so you can add a sub-emitter on there, but we don't need that for now. Let's have a look at trails. Oh, I see, so you can follow the path. We don't really need those either. Okay, let's have a look. So, go down to our renderer now. So we don't need to bother too much about the shadows. Okay, so it's pretty nice. Get the render on. Right, so let's close those up here. Okay, so we need to now maybe look at the speed because that still looks a little bit slow. Obviously, we drop that down, it's going to be really slow, but let's speed that up. Okay, it's too quick, so. Start lifetime, let's have a look, see what difference that makes. Yeah, so if we don't really want it to be too long, because obviously the explosion wouldn't keep going out, we could maybe look at adding a sort of smoke cloud or something like that and see how that plays, but that might clutter the screen a little bit. We really just want a more contained, shorter explosion. Too short, okay. Let's try that. That's a bit better, okay. So let's try that for now, and then we can come back to tweaking this, but let's actually get this hooked into it. We can have a look at this in the actual game. Obviously, like I said, it's going to loop over and over again, it's going to fire every time. So that's what it's going to look like. So now let's move on to actually triggering it. So we need to make sure, obviously our actual particle system itself only fires the once, we don't want it to loop, and we don't want it to play on awake, which basically means that as soon as that object is instantiated and is awake, it's playing, and then it was looping over and over again. We don't want either of those things, so we'll save that. And obviously now we basically shouldn't see our particle effects at all. We only want it to occur once we have destroyed the object. So for that, we're going to need to go over to our enemy script. Sorry, our damageable script. So we moved everything into damageable before, and here where we have to destroy game object, we now want to trigger our particle effect basically. So to do that, we are going to want to get a reference to our particle system. Obviously we added it as a component, so we need a reference to that. We'll call that explosion, and then we can call play. So we're triggering that particle now on the enemy being destroyed. But as you can see, we don't have our particle effect, and the reason for that is because obviously we are destroying our game objects immediately, and so we don't see that particle effect, because obviously the particle system is on the game object, and if it gets destroyed straight away, the particle gets cleaned up as well. So the destroy argument method takes an additional optional argument, which is the duration to wait before destroying, and then we can use the duration of the particle effect, so that we're effectively then saying play the explosion and then destroy the game object after the explosion is done, basically. So rather than needing a callback or a coroutine or something like that to keep checking where the explosion is finished, we can just use the duration of the particle effect, as we're only using it once, and we'll clean up and destroy our game object then instead. So let's have a little look. You can see there they explode. And if we go to our hierarchy, we can see, let's just restart that, we can see that our enemy clones get destroyed once once the particle effect is done, basically. So now when the player is getting destroyed, obviously the game is over straight away, but what would be quite good is if we could have a particle effect on that as well. Now we have a sort of separate routine here. So if we were to move this out and call that either way, so whether it's a player or an enemy, if the lives left is less than or equal to 0, we want to trigger that particle system. But obviously we don't have a particle system yet on our player, so let's do the same thing on our player prefab. and we're also going to want to copy the particle system over to our tough enemy as well, because at the minute if we restart and we kill enough to get to our tough enemies, we can see that then that the tough enemies won't be getting destroyed with our particle effect either. The game is actually getting quite difficult now. Okay. So we need to add them to the tough enemy as well. So for that we will go to our particle system, copy our component, and on our tough enemy, open our prefab, add a particle system, and then paste component values, and we can see now that's the same. And the same for our player prefab. Open that up, add our particle system, and paste component values. Let's give that a play. Didn't quite kill a tough enemy, right. Okay, so that works now. The tough enemy is exploding. The game over is kicking in. Did we get to see the explosion or not? Yeah, it's kicking in too quickly. So for this one, we do want a slight delay before we stop the game. So for that, we can then do here. We do that. We do game manager invoke. And again, I think that takes a duration then. Let's try that. So we should then be able to see the player explode, I think. Let's give that a go. And then it'll stop the game. This one's a little bit easier to test. Wait for them to shoot and kill us. Explosion, and when the explosion's done, we get game over. So the last thing to do is probably just shorten that particle effect a little bit, especially for the player. It's quite nice to have the explosion effect with the enemies. Obviously you're still playing, but for the player I think we just shorten that a little bit. So let's make that 0.5 seconds so it's shorter and sharper. And then that way, if you die, you're not sort of waiting around to explode. You just get a nice little particle effect, and then straight into game over. And there we have it. A little look at the Unity particle system there. One of the more common particle effects, the explosion, but with all the customization options, we can still sort of make it our own, and the different features for randomization means that each one can be slightly different as well. So it helps improve the feel of the game as well. It makes it more satisfying when you kill one of those enemies and they explode like that. So really, those sort of graphical flourishes really help the game and how it plays. In a future episode, I think we'll continue to look at the sort of look and feel of the game. Maybe looking at some shaders for sort of neon glowing effects and those sort of things. And also perhaps the actual feel of the game, maybe adding some screen shake to the camera and that sort of stuff to just really sort of bring the action together with those little flourishes. So we'll look at that in a future episode, but I hope you enjoyed the episode today. If you did, please share with your friends. Any feedback, suggestions, stuff you'd like to see in a future episode, drop in that comment box below. Yeah, if you want to know when the next episode drops, please hit that subscribe button. And I hope to see you back for the next episode of DDC. Peace out. Hope you enjoyed that episode of Daily Dev Club. If you'd like to see another one, click this link right here. Suggestions and feedback are always welcome. Down below in the comments, please. And of course, if you want to know when the next episode drops, please smash that subscribe button.